The field was quiet that night, cloaked in the kind of eerie silence only rural Nebraska could offer. Crickets chirped faintly, and the occasional rustle of wind through the wheat broke the stillness. But then, the air shimmered unnaturally, a sudden wave of energy rippling outward like a stone tossed into a pond. The sky darkened and a swirling blue portal tore open in the middle of the field, bathing the area in an otherworldly glow. From the portal stepped creatures unlike anything Earth had ever seen. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, clad in sleek metallic armor that clung to their frames like second skin. Their helmets were smooth, featureless save for a horizontal slit that glowed with an eerie cyan light. Weapons resembling rifles, but humming with an unsettling energy hung from their backs, and their movements were unerringly fluid, more mechanical than organic. Commander Zalthor was the first to step through, his imposing figure casting a long shadow across the ground. The leader of this invasion force, Zalthor was a veteran of countless planetary conquests. He had seen civilizations rise and fall, had led the Galactic Dominion's armies across the cosmos. To him, Earth was just another primitive backwater planet, its inhabitants no more significant than insects. He raised an arm, and a holographic map of the area flickered to life from his wrist device. "Scan the area," he ordered in his deep, synthetic voice, his tone cold and efficient. No resistance expected, but remain alert. His soldiers fanned out, their boots leaving faint scorch marks in the grass as they moved. Their visor lights scanned the terrain like predatory eyes. Sweeping over the old farmhouse at the edge of the field, the rusting tractor parked near a barn, and the distant tree line that bordered the property. From their perspective, it was a ghost town, a perfect location for a forward operations base. But what Zalthor and his soldiers failed to realize was that the quiet masked something far deadlier than they had anticipated. Miles away, in a secluded cabin tucked deep within the woods, Jack Callahan cleaned his rifle. The faint glow of a single lamp lit the small, Spartan interior. The former Navy SEAL had lived in solitude since his retirement, choosing the wilderness over the chaos of civilization. To most, he was a ghost, a man who had disappeared after decades of service. Jack wasn't the type to watch the news or browse social media, but even he had heard the rumors, whispers of strange phenomena, of lights in the sky and missing persons. He had dismissed it as paranoia, the kind of thing people dreamed up when they spent too much time scrolling through conspiracy forums. But now, as he heard a faint hum in the distance, a sound that didn't belong in the stillness of a Nebraska night, his instincts kicked in. Rising from his chair, Jack grabbed his binoculars and climbed onto the roof of his cabin. From this vantage point, he could see over the treetops of the distant field. At first, there was nothing, but then he spotted the faint blue glow on the horizon. "What the hell?" he muttered, narrowing his eyes. He adjusted the focus on his binoculars and his heart sank. The figures he saw were not human. They moved with precision, their alien forms sleek and menacing under the moonlight. He counted at least 20, though there could have been more hidden by the wheat. Then he saw the portal, still swirling behind them, and realized this wasn't just some bizarre local event. This was an invasion. Back in the field, Zalthor finished his initial assessment. Primitive structures, no energy signatures of significance, he reported to his soldiers. The inhabitants of this region are unarmed and unprepared. Secure the perimeter and establish a landing zone for reinforcements. The soldiers obeyed without question, deploying drones to scout the area. The small, spherical machines zipped through the air, their scanners glowing as they mapped the terrain. Zalthor observed the data streaming across his visor. It confirmed what he already knew. Earth would fall within hours. But as the drones ventured closer to the tree line, one of them suddenly went dark. Then another. Zalthor frowned. "Report," he demanded. "We've lost contact with 2 units near the eastern tree line," one of his subordinates replied. "Send a squad to investigate," Zalthor ordered. A team of 5 soldiers broke off and advanced toward the forest, their weapons at the ready. As they entered the shadowy woods, they switched to infrared vision, scanning for any heat signatures. Nothing, one of them said, his voice distorted by his helmet's comm system. They pushed deeper into the trees, unaware they were being watched. Jack had already moved into position, his sniper rifle trained on the group. He exhaled slowly, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. The first shot rang out, the sound muffled by a suppressor. The lead soldier dropped instantly, a hole punched clean through his visor. "Contact!" another soldier shouted, raising his rifle. But before he could react, Jack fired again, and a second alien collapsed. The remaining 3 scattered, taking cover behind trees. Jack smirked. "Not so tough now," he muttered, repositioning himself with the practiced ease of a predator. The aliens tried to coordinate, but Jack's familiarity with guerrilla tactics gave him the upper hand. He moved like a shadow, firing from unexpected angles and setting up traps with improvised explosives. By the time the skirmish was over, all 5 soldiers lay dead, their advanced armor useless against Jack's skill and ingenuity. Zalthor stared at the feed from his soldiers' body cams, his glowing visor narrowing in frustration. One by one, the feeds had gone dark. The primitive heat signatures detected in the area didn't match the level of resistance they were encountering. "One human is doing this," he growled, his voice tinged with disbelief. He tapped a command into his wrist device, summoning reinforcements. Dozens more soldiers emerged from the portal, their glowing visors illuminating the field like a constellation of cyan stars. "Fan out," Zalthor ordered. "Flush this pest out of the woods." But Jack had already anticipated their response. He was no stranger to being outnumbered, and he thrived on asymmetric warfare. The woods were his domain now, a battlefield he could manipulate to his advantage. As the soldiers advanced, they triggered tripwires Jack had set, each one linked to a crude but effective explosive device. The blast sent alien bodies flying, their armor unable to withstand the shrapnel. Those who survived found themselves under sniper fire, their attempts to return fire futile against an enemy they couldn't see. In the field, Zalthor clenched his fists. This was supposed to be a simple operation, a show of dominance to crush any potential resistance before it began. Yet his forces were being systematically dismantled by a single human. He turned to his second-in-command. "Prepare the drones," he said. "We will flush this ghost out and end him." But deep in the woods, Jack Callahan was already preparing for the next phase. He wasn't just fighting for survival. He was sending a message. "Come on," he muttered to himself, his voice low but steady. "Let's see what you really got." The woods were alive with tension, every shadow concealing potential danger. Galactic Dominion drones hummed through the air, their glowing scanners sweeping the forest floor. Behind them marched squads of alien soldiers, their advanced energy rifles at the ready. Each step they took was measured, precise, their movements more mechanical than organic. Commander Zalthor observed from a tactical command post set up near the portal. Holograms of the surrounding terrain flickered in front of him, displaying troop positions and drone feeds. His frustration was mounting. They had deployed drones and soldiers in overwhelming numbers, yet the elusive human continued to elude and decimate their forces. "This is no ordinary primitive," Zalthor muttered. The soldiers moved deeper into the forest, their cyan visor lights slicing through the gloom. But this was Jack Callahan's domain now, a battlefield molded to his advantage. Jack crouched in a thicket of underbrush, his breathing slow and controlled. His mud-smeared face blended seamlessly with the environment, masking his body heat from the drones overhead. Every move he made was calculated, every second a test of patience honed through years of training. He watched as a squad of 6 alien soldiers moved into his kill zone. The path they followed was littered with subtle traps Jack had laid, tripwires strung low between roots, improvised explosives hidden under layers of leaves. He waited until the squad was perfectly positioned. With a flick of his wrist, he triggered the first device. A deafening explosion tore through the silence, sending 2 soldiers flying and scattering the others into defensive positions. "Stay calm. "Hold formation," one barked, their synthetic voice distorted by the comm system. Jack was already on the move. He fired a suppressed shot from his rifle, taking out a soldier who had momentarily broken cover. Another turned toward the sound, only to trip a secondary trap, a sharpened spike rigged to swing from the trees. Within seconds, the squad was reduced to one panicked soldier. Jack stepped out of the shadows, his knife glinting faintly in the moonlight. The alien raised his rifle, but Jack was faster. He lunged forward, slicing through the exposed joint between the alien's armor plates. The creature gurgled a final sound before collapsing. Jack knelt beside the body and retrieved a small device from its wrist, a communication relay. He examined it briefly before shoving it into his pack. "Might be useful later," he muttered. The destruction of yet another squad sent shockwaves through the Dominion forces. Zalthor slammed his fist onto the holographic table. "Unacceptable. Deploy the Manticores." Manticores were the Dominion's most advanced combat drones. Each was a multi-limb mechanical predator equipped with infrared vision, energy cannons, and a suite of other deadly tools. They were designed for one purpose: to hunt and eliminate targets in hostile environments. The first wave of Manticores entered the forest, their 8 metallic legs moving with an unsettling, spider-like grace. They moved faster than the standard drones, their scanners more advanced. From his position, Jack heard the distinct hum of the approaching machines. He adjusted the scope on his rifle and peered through the trees. When he saw the Manticores, his lips pressed into a grim line. "Well, that's new." He aimed for the nearest drone and fired. The shot struck its head, but the armor was too thick. The Manticore swiveled toward him instantly, its sensors locking onto the sound. Jack cursed under his breath and bolted deeper into the woods as the Manticore unleashed a barrage of energy bolts. Trees splintered and exploded around him, the forest lighting up in flashes of blue and orange. Jack sprinted through the chaos, zigzagging to avoid the fire. He dived into a shallow trench he had dug earlier, rolling just as another burst of energy scorched the ground where he had stood moments before. Pulling a grenade from his vest, he primed it with a 3-second timer and lobbed it toward the Manticore. The explosion sent the drone reeling, one of its legs blown off. But it wasn't destroyed. The machine recalibrated and began limping toward him. "Persistent little bastard," Jack muttered. Switching tactics, he grabbed a bundle of C4 from his pack and attached it to a makeshift tripwire strung between 2 trees. He baited the Manticore by firing a few shots, drawing it closer. As the drone crossed the wire, Jack detonated the explosive. The blast was deafening, sending shrapnel flying in all directions. When the dust cleared, the Manticore lay in pieces. But Jack knew more were coming. Back at the command post, Zalthor watched the feed from the Manticores. His frustration turned to anger as he saw another of the drones go dark. This human was not just skilled. He was a predator. "Pull back the Manticores," Zalthor ordered. "This requires a personal touch." Donning his own battle gear, Zalthor prepared to enter the battlefield. His armor was a masterpiece of Dominion engineering, reinforced with adaptive shielding and armed with an energy blade that crackled with raw power. He had faced the fiercest warriors in the galaxy and emerged victorious every time. This human would be no different. Jack, meanwhile, had taken a moment to regroup. He sat in a small cave near the base of a hill, his body covered in dirt and sweat. His hands worked quickly, reloading his weapons and rigging more traps. His mind was already analyzing the patterns of the Dominion forces, predicting their next moves. But then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of something heavy approaching. The ground seemed to tremble with each step. He emerged cautiously from the cave, his eyes scanning the dark forest. And then he saw him. Commander Zalthor stepped into the clearing, his towering frame illuminated by the faint glow of his armor. His energy blade hummed ominously, casting flickering shadows across the ground. Jack raised his rifle, but Zalthor moved with blinding speed. Before Jack could fire, the alien commander was upon him, slashing with his blade. Jack dodged, barely avoiding the lethal strike, and rolled to the side. "Impressive," Zalthor said, his voice cold and mechanical. "But this ends now." Jack didn't reply. He threw a smoke grenade, obscuring the area, and disappeared into the haze. Zalthor's visor switched to thermal vision, but Jack had anticipated that. He had smeared himself with a mixture of mud and ash, masking his heat signature. The fight turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse. Zalthor swung his blade with precision, cutting through trees and rocks, but Jack used the terrain to his advantage. He struck from unexpected angles, using hit-and-run tactics to keep Zalthor off balance. Finally, Jack managed to lure Zalthor into one of his traps, a shallow pit lined with sharpened stakes. The alien commander fell, his armor absorbing most of the impact, but leaving him momentarily stunned. Jack didn't hesitate. He leapt into the pit, knife in hand, and drove it into the exposed joint between Zalthor's neck and shoulder. The alien let out a guttural roar, his energy blade flickering and dying. "You underestimated us," Jack said, his voice low and steady. Zalthor's visor dimmed as he choked out his final words. "You are not human." Jack climbed out of the pit, breathing heavily. Around him, the forest was silent once more. But he knew the battle wasn't over. This was only the beginning. "Let them come," he muttered, his resolve hardening. "I'll be ready." The forest was eerily quiet in the aftermath of Zalthor's death. The towering alien commander lay crumpled in the shallow pit, his once imposing armor now lifeless and dim. Jack Callahan stood above him, knife still clenched in his hand, his chest rising and falling with each steady breath. The glow of Zalthor's energy blade faded into the dirt, and with it, the immediate threat seemed to dissipate. But Jack knew better. This was no victory. It was merely a delay. The Galactic Dominion was relentless, a juggernaut that spanned countless worlds. Zalthor's death would be a footnote to them, unless Jack sent a message they couldn't ignore. Securing the battlefield, Jack moved swiftly, collecting anything of value from the alien soldiers and the fallen Manticore drones. Their technology was far more advanced than anything on Earth, but Jack's experience had taught him that even the most sophisticated tech had weaknesses. From Zalthor's wrist device, Jack extracted a small, glowing cube, a memory core that seemed to hum with stored data. He didn't know exactly what it contained, but it was clearly important. "This might give us a fighting chance," he muttered, slipping it into his pack. He also retrieved an intact communication relay from one of the fallen soldiers. It was a sleek, palm-sized device with an interface that projected holograms in the alien script. Jack studied it for a moment before shoving it into his pocket. If he could access their communications network, he could broadcast a warning or a threat. The forest was littered with debris, but Jack wasn't interested in cleanup. Instead, he set to work rigging the battlefield with traps and explosives. If the Dominion sent another squad to recover their commander's body, they'd find nothing but carnage. As he worked, he spoke aloud to himself, a habit he developed over years of solitary missions. "They'll come back. They always do. Question is, how soon and how many?" The aftermath. By dawn, Jack had retreated to his cabin. He sat at a makeshift workstation cluttered with scavenged alien tech and his own military-grade equipment. The communication relay was connected to a tangle of wires and adapters, patched into his old satellite uplink. The memory core glowed faintly on the table. Jack had spent hours examining it, using every tool at his disposal to decode its secrets. Finally, a breakthrough came. A holographic projection flickered to life, displaying a series of maps and coordinates. "What's this?" Jack murmured, leaning closer. The map showed Earth, but overlaid with alien annotations. Key locations were marked: cities, military bases, and resource-rich regions. It was a tactical plan, a blueprint for the Dominion's invasion. Jack's jaw tightened. So that's their game. He pressed further, uncovering snippets of intercepted Dominion communications. The alien language was indecipherable to him, But the tone was clear: urgency, confusion, and anger. Zalthor's failure had not gone unnoticed. The message, with the relay patched into his uplink, Jack began crafting his response. It wasn't just a warning. It was a declaration of defiance. He stared at the blinking cursor on his screen, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Words had never been his weapon of choice, but this was different. He activated the relay, tapping into the Dominion's network. A low hum filled the room as the device connected, its holographic interface shimmering. Jack's voice would soon echo across the stars, reaching the Dominion's central command. "This is Lieutenant Commander Jack Callahan of Earth," he began, his tone steady and unyielding. "You came here thinking we were weak. You thought we'd roll over, let you take our planet without a fight. You were wrong." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I've killed your commander. I've dismantled your squads. Your drones are scrap metal scattered across our forests. If you think you can send more, I'll be waiting. And next time, I won't be alone." Jack leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Consider this your only warning. Earth isn't just another planet for you to conquer. It's home to people who will fight to the last breath. You may have the numbers, the technology, the power, but we have something you'll never understand: the will to survive." With that, Jack ended the transmission. The relay blinked once, indicating the message had been sent. Preparation. Jack knew the Dominion wouldn't take his threat lightly. They would come back, and when they did, they'd bring an even larger force. He couldn't rely on the element of surprise forever. He spent the following days fortifying his cabin, transforming it into a fortress. Tripwires crisscrossed the surrounding woods, connected to explosives and traps. Sniper nests were camouflaged in the treetops, offering clear sightlines to the field below. Inside the cabin, Jack stockpiled weapons, ammunition, and supplies. He also reached out to old contacts using secure channels. Most thought he was crazy when he mentioned aliens, but a few fellow veterans who trusted him implicitly listened. They promised to gather what resources they could and head his way. "If they don't believe me now," Jack said grimly, "they will soon enough." The Dominion's response. Far away, in the cold vacuum of space, the Galactic Dominion's central command received Jack's message. The holographic projection of the human's face loomed in their war room, his words reverberating through the chamber. The Dominion's High Council sat in stunned silence, their sleek forms barely moving as they processed the transmission. "This human," one of them finally said, his voice a mix of curiosity and disdain. "He challenges us." Another counselor, her glowing eyes narrowing, replied, "He killed Commander Zalthor and defeated an elite detachment. That warrants consideration." "No!" the first counselor snapped. "It warrants annihilation." They turned to the Supreme Commander, a towering figure whose armor radiated authority. "What are your orders?" The Supreme Commander's voice was calm, but laced with menace. "Earth is more formidable than we anticipated. This Jack Callahan may be a unique anomaly, but he represents a threat to our plans. Mobilize the fleet, deploy a larger force, and bring him to me alive. A new dawn, back on Earth." Jack sat on the porch of his cabin, his rifle resting against the railing. The morning sun rose over the horizon, casting golden light across the forest. For a brief moment, the world seemed at peace. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of pine and earth. But Jack knew it was only the calm before the storm. He glanced at the sky, his mind racing with possibilities. Somewhere out there, the Dominion was regrouping. They would come back with more soldiers, more ships, more firepower. And when they did, they'd find Earth ready to fight. Jack's fingers tightened around his rifle. He had spent his life fighting impossible battles, facing enemies stronger and more numerous than he could ever hope to match. This was no different. "Let them come," he said quietly, his voice steady and resolute. "They'll learn the hard way. Earth doesn't kneel." And so, the stage was set for the next chapter in the battle for Earth, a war that would determine the fate of humanity itself. Jack Callahan, the lone Navy SEAL who had defied the galaxy's most powerful empire, would stand at the forefront of the resistance, a symbol of humanity's unyielding spirit. For 3 weeks, Jack Callahan prepared. The forest surrounding his cabin had become a labyrinth of traps, trenches, and concealed weapon caches. He had created a battlefield designed to slow, confuse, and destroy any invading force. While he worked, a handful of his trusted allies, former Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and other veterans, arrived to join him. Each man and woman who came brought their skills, weapons, and unrelenting resolve. Jack briefed them on everything he knew about the Galactic Dominion, their tactics, their strengths, and their weaknesses. They didn't question him. His scars and the alien tech scattered around the cabin were proof enough. "We've faced worse odds," said Captain Elena Vasquez, a demolitions expert who had served with Jack in Afghanistan. "This is just a bigger battlefield." Jack smirked. "With some uglier enemies." The arrival. At 0300 hours on a cold, moonless night, the Dominion returned. The first sign was a faint rumble in the sky. Then came the lights. Hundreds of them, glowing red against the darkness as Dominion dropships descended through the clouds. Each ship was sleek and angular, bristling with weapons. Behind them, massive carriers hovered in orbit, ready to deploy reinforcements at a moment's notice. Jack stood on the porch of his cabin, binoculars in hand, as the ships touched down in a nearby clearing. "Here we go," he muttered, turning to his team. "Positions now." The group moved with practiced precision, slipping into their assigned posts throughout the forest. Jack remained near the cabin, his rifle slung over his shoulder and a detonator in his hand. The Dominion soldiers emerged from their ships in tight formations, their glowing visors slicing through the darkness. They spread out, scanning the area with advanced sensors. Leading them was a new commander, a hulking figure in black armor, flanked by manticores and heavily armed shock troopers. "Humans," the commander's voice boomed, amplified by his suit. "You have chosen defiance. Your resistance is meaningless. Surrender now, and you may yet live." Jack's voice crackled over the team's comms. "Wait for my signal. The first strike." The Dominion soldiers advanced cautiously, their scanners probing the forest for signs of movement. They didn't have to wait long. A tripwire snapped, triggering an explosion that sent shrapnel tearing through the first squad. Chaos erupted as more traps detonated in rapid succession. Hidden mines, collapsing tree trunks, and spikes rigged to fire from the ground. The manticores activated, their glowing scanners sweeping for targets. But Jack and his team moved like shadows, striking from the trees and disappearing before the Dominion could react. Elena, stationed on a ridge with a rocket launcher, took out one of the dropships as it tried to take off. The explosion lit up the night, and a cheer crackled over the comms. "Nice shot," Jack said. "Just getting started," Elena replied. The fight escalates. The Dominion quickly adapted, deploying shield drones to protect their troops and sending manticores to flush out the humans. Jack watched from a concealed position as one of the machines approached, its energy cannons glowing ominously. "Vince, you're up," he said into his radio. A former Marine sniper, Vince had taken position high in a tree. He fired a high-caliber round into the manticore's primary sensor array, blinding it. As the machine flailed, Jack emerged from cover and lobbed a grenade at its undercarriage. The explosion tore the manticone apart. "Clean kill," Vince said. "Stay sharp." "They're not done yet," Jack replied. Inside the storm, the Dominion commander, observing the carnage from a central position, grew impatient. "Bring the heavy walkers," he ordered. Moments later, towering mechs stepped off the dropships, their long legs crushing trees as they advanced. Each mech was armed with twin plasma cannons, capable of leveling buildings. "Jack, we've got a problem," Elena said over the comms. "I see them," Jack replied, his mind racing. He had anticipated heavy machinery, but not at this scale. He grabbed his comms. "Elena, take the South Walker. Vince, Aim for the joints on the west one. I'll handle the lead. Jack sprinted toward the lead mech, dodging plasma blasts that scorched the earth around him. He reached a concealed cache where he'd stashed a portable rocket system, loading a warhead. He took aim at the mech's knee joint and fired. The explosion crippled the mech, sending it crashing to the ground. Jack ran toward the cockpit, pulling a shaped charge from his pack. He slapped it onto the mech's hull, diving for cover as it detonated. The mech exploded in a fireball, taking out nearby Dominion troops. Turning the tide, the battle raged for hours. Jack's team fought with ruthless efficiency, using the terrain and their traps to outmaneuver the Dominion forces. Despite their superior numbers and technology, the aliens struggled to gain ground. But the humans weren't unscathed. Vince was hit by a stray plasma bolt, and Elena's position was nearly overrun before Jack arrived to reinforce her. "We're running low on ammo," Elena said, wiping blood from her face. "We just need to hold out a little longer," Jack replied, his voice calm despite the chaos. The final push. As dawn approached, the Dominion launched a desperate assault. Dropships rained fire on the forest, turning swathes of it into smoldering ruins. Jack's team was forced to fall back to the cabin, their traps exhausted and their ammunition nearly gone. The Dominion commander led the charge, his armor glowing with energy. "Surrender," he bellowed. Jack stood in front of the cabin, his rifle slung across his back and a detonator in his hand. "Not a chance." He pressed the detonator. The ground erupted as Jack triggered the last line of explosives, a chain reaction that tore through the advancing Dominion forces. Soldiers, manticores, and even one of the remaining mechs were caught in the blast. When the smoke cleared, the battlefield was eerily silent. The Dominion forces lay in ruins, their commander among the dead. Victory and resolve. Jack and his team emerged from the wreckage, battered but alive. They surveyed the devastation, the bodies of alien soldiers and the twisted remains of their machines scattered across the forest. Elena walked up to Jack, her face grim. "Do you think this is it?" Jack shook his head. "No, this was just a scouting force. The real invasion is coming." The team fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Jack looked at the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight broke through the smoke-filled sky. "We showed them what happens when they mess with Earth. Now we need to make sure the rest of the world is ready." As the survivors began gathering their supplies and tending to the wounded, Jack turned to Elena. "Get the word out," he said. "It's time to fight back." And with that, Jack Callahan began preparing for the next phase of humanity's war against the Galactic Dominion, a fight that would span the globe and beyond, pitting Earth's unyielding spirit against an empire determined to crush it.